el amor. Yeah. No quiero perder lo que queda. Y más allá, a través de la gran oscuridad, hasta que me convierta en rayos. Y más allá, a través de la gran oscuridad. Y más encontrando vida en el camino, melodías que no hemos tocado, y yo no quiero descansar. Resuena por la pared, creando una canción. No quiero perder el ritmo. Y más allá, a través de la gran oscuridad, hasta que me convierta en rayos. Y más allá, a través de la gran oscuridad. Y más crucemos el número en solo un trueno de horizontes. Seremos miles. Crecemos en número en solo un trueno de horizontes. Seremos miles. Más allá, a través de la gran oscuridad, hasta que me convierta en rayos. Y más allá, a través de la gran oscuridad. Y más allá.
We both have thoughts of leaving when thoughts get thrown around. But we keep going on believing, and on till we're all cried out. 'Cause we don't feel like throwing it all away. We don't feel like it. But this time it's not about escaping. We don't feel like it. We don't feel like it. 'Cause we don't feel like throwing it all away. We don't feel like it.
G'day, g'day, g'day. We are live. PowerShell 101 live. I'm just going to do a quick sound check. Make sure that's all good. 2 secs. Yep, cool. Alrighty. Welcome to PowerShell 101 live. Today we will be covering part 2 of logging with unit. I will be covering part 2 with unit testing. With testing. We also will be doing some logging, and finally we'll be wrapping this course up with some PS cones, and we'll just be going through that and giving you guys a bit of a run through with that, so you guys can kind of do some extra work outside of this course. And that will conclude PowerShell 101 Live series until next year after Summit. And then after then, we'll basically be doing PowerShell 101, 102 live, which will basically be extending on and going to more advanced content. So let's get started. So we'll just quickly recover or do a quick recap. Let me just quickly flick the screen. So there was a couple of things we needed to quickly go through. My PowerPoint was hung. So obviously we covered what consists of a test, with what people say about tests, different levels of tests, things like that. Actually, I'm just going to do it through here. So things like that, obviously mocking, AAA concepts. We looked at writing unit tests, what consists of a good test, looking at Pester, and then obviously looking at how Pester structures, things like that. We've done a lot of demos with that. All that you can catch on the PowerShell channel. The PowerShell channel, the Brisbane PowerShell user group. I'm just gonna user group. So if you want to watch those streams, you can just go ahead and you can get them here. I'm just going to tag you in the entire I'm going to tag you in the actual playlist. Add the playlist. So that's that. Just wait for it to stop. Okay, so that's the playlist. You guys can get all the files. Files are all accessible. Let me just go grab the files. Oh, I just dropped into a Discord channel accidentally again. That's that. Pop that in there. So there you obviously your files. So you can actually go and have a look at the slides, all the demos, everything's up there, and you can just go ahead and download it. There's no issues. And after this, I'll be putting it into on my GitHub. So obviously, the OneDrive link will probably expire within the next few weeks. Alrighty, so let's keep going on with what we're doing. So we're in some scenarios. So I'm just going to quickly crack open the. We can close that. We were in a scenario, so we did our math function scenario, which we wrote some unit tests for, did we? Oh no, that's parameterized testing. So we had our math function. We did write some unit tests for that. So essentially, we just needed to write a couple of unit tests. So we had 2 code execution paths, which we needed to test. And now we've got the Invoke Web Request, Web Request function. So this is actually a bit more of an advanced test. But at the same time, though, it just obviously helps people articulate what's going on. So let's write some Pester tests. While we're doing that, I'm just going to bring up that and see how we're going. So essentially, we've got Pester. So let's go ahead and write some of this. So essentially, we've got here, we've got a couple of code execution paths. It's taking a URL link of, it's taking a URL parameter. Obviously, that should be mandatory. Actually, no, we're not going to refactor this. We're just going to leave it like that. We'll refactor it as we need later. So what we can do is we actually need to test this. So first thing we need to do is work out what code execution paths we have here. So there's a couple of code execution paths that we need. We've obviously going to need to we've got this specific path, so it's whether it exists or not. So that's potentially, there could be a site that doesn't have any links. We've got and then obviously it's going through its subsequent links and then enumerating them. So there's potential there. So I think there's going to be 3 code execution paths, a lot of mocking. So we got FormatAbsolute URL, so we can use that as our test within here. We've got, just kind of looking around what we've got here. This, to be honest, can be refactored into its own function, but we'll just leave it for the time being. We've got FormatAbsolute URL there as well. So that's going to be an interesting one to work out how to mock. I think what we can do here is yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because ultimately we probably need to abstract that away to its own function to be able to actually do that. So what we need to do now, I'm just kind of hard. Like I literally copied and pasted this from previous demos, and I'm kind of looking at it going, oh, this is actually not really good testable code. We'll write it the best we can. Now there is a demo that we have up here, which we're basically going to be able to refactor it. So basically, that's the process of refactoring existing code so that it's testable. And this is actually right now I'm looking at this going, it can probably do with a refactor to improve it. So anyway, let's write some pester tests. So first things first, let's get our describe block, and we're just going to go testing, and we're just going to pass our function get URL links like so. Just make sure we're spelling everything, and obviously we're going to tag it accordingly. We're just going to go unit. Doesn't really have anything else there. Now we have a couple of, there's a couple of execution paths. This is actually going to be more extensive mocking than anything else. I'm just thinking about the mocking, and that's going to be something that we're going to probably need to test. So what we can actually do here is I'm going to create a mocks directory. Demo mocks, like so, and we're going to basically chuck that in our demos. Yep, move it, I don't care. And we're actually going to actually run some, we're actually going to run Invoke Web Requests, and we're just going to store the output in a mock. So we're not actually emulating it, we're just going to mock it from that file. So let's go ahead and do that. That's our first thing we need to do. So let's just go invoke web request. Actually, no, we're going to go get URL links. Get URL links. Invoke web request .mock .xml, something along those lines. All right, so what we can do now is let's just go to Google. So we're just going to get our content, invoke web request, like so, content like that. So we've got our content. And what we can actually do is let's export that as a XML, like so. Actually, we'll just put it in a path. And let's just go demo mocks. And let's call it, this is kind of annoying. Demo mocks. I'm just going to call a.xml for the time being, so I can rename it up here. So what we need to do here is we need to call it something. So I'm just going to call it invoke get URL links. So we're going to name it like that. Invoke web request parent. I'm just going to call it parent.mock.xml. So let's have a look at it. That's our mock. So you can see there's a ton of random stuff. Now you don't need to have all this. It's essentially, I'm just mocking the entire object. It just makes it a little easier to track, especially manage. It's not the end of the world. We don't really need to worry about it. So what we can do now is we can mock that in. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we need to do is mock Invoke Web Request. This is going to be interesting because we've got multiple Invoke Web Requests in here, and it might need to be able to do parameterize. We're going to need to refactor this, I think. We're going to need to refactor this. I'm just looking at it from a mocking perspective. It's going to make it really difficult to mock this specific aspect. So what we can do, let's just quickly refactor some of this code. Child links. So what we're going to do here is just going to get parameter. And what have we got? I'm just going to give it an object. And what we're going to do is just basically return the entire So it's going to return the entire, just going to run that and abstract that away. So let's just go enumerated links. So what's that? Links, what is? It's PS custom object. That's perfect. We can just pass that in. So what we can do here is we just pass that in like so. So it accepts a PS custom object. And then we can just do a write output. Child URLs. Now we would need to write unit tests for this specific one as well, but we're just going to exclude this for this demo because I'm not. We will cover refactoring code. I'm just kind of. I think this demo is just a little bit too complicated for the time being. So I want you guys to forget about this specific function and me abstracting it away. What you need to just focus on is the fact that okay, we're just gonna pass it. Control why? What I need you to focus on is just obviously the test itself. We're just basically writing some basic unit tests. So I'm just kind of get this up to date. So we're gonna get child URLs. Get child URLs, enumerated links, like so. Then we can mock this, which is quite easy to mock. So all it's doing is, you can see it's just going to invoke web request, and it's going to multiple URLs, so we can mock that. So that's fixed that part. Now we're just quickly going through, if there's combine URL links, it's combining them all, format URL. We probably need to abstract this away as well. So what we can do here, let's just quickly create a function to abstract that away. What type is that? Just quickly undo that so I can see what type it is. Combine links. Which child URLs, combine links. Okay, so it's all strings. So what we can do here, we can just basically pass it a string array and then it'll deal with it. So we can just go function get absolute URLs like so. Let's just put a parameter block in there. Give it a type string. Make it a string array, and then we're going to basically just pass it. What's it expecting? Combine links. Alright, I'm just going to pass it combine links. I'm going to abstract it in. So essentially what I can do here, So we abstract that away, which means then it's mockable. And there we go. So now what we've got is we've just quickly refactored this code. I'm just kind of looking at that. Combine links for each object. Yep. Create a PS custom object, original enumerated URL. Just taking the parent URL, which is fine. FormatAbsolute URL, which is URL that with parent URL. Yep. Write the output. Okay, so it's returning a PS custom object. And it's taking strings inbound. Sweet. We're good to go. So what we can do now is essentially we can actually get our links. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to, again, we're going to forget get absolute URLs. We're only going to be focusing on the mock element here. So so let's go ahead, and this actually, we can actually probably get away with just one unit test here. We actually don't even need to have a context block because we've simplified our code execution to an extent. We actually could, actually no, I'm going to write, we'll just write multiple because I do think there is a need for multiple tests. So we're just going to call it standard execution. Because we have different executions here. We have executions that basically have an invalid execution. We have an invalid URL. We have all different types of executions here. So let's just go standard execution. So what we've got here is let's go ahead and build our test out. So let's go ahead and range our tests. So first thing we need to do is mock. Now, one of the things that we can do, we'll just mock it all in here. We're not going to go any deeper with the mocking for the time being. So let's go ahead and mock command name, web requests. We're then going to mock it with a URI. Actually, we don't even need to pass it the URI. So we're just going to pass it mock with, and we're going to basically do this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go return, and then we're going to go import CLI.XML. Import CLI.XML, literal path, we're just going to specify the path as demos / VS Code / demos / demo mocks / get URL links, like so. And what we're going to do is just wrap that inside a path and inside a string. Oops, it's just doubled. So we're mocking that. We also need to mock FormatAbsolute. Oh, we're going to need to mock it. We don't need to, but I'm just thinking, do we actually really need to? We can probably get away with not really. It would be good to track it though. So I will mock it. So what we're going to go is format mock with, and now we need to format it. So essentially we need to make a mock for this. So what we're going to need to do, we've got combined links. What's combined links? It's just, I'm just kind of, FormatAbsolute URL. Oh, I don't actually have the function here. It helps if I actually have the function. Because I actually need to know how it's actually expecting the format. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to go try and find it. That's a pain in the backside. Okay, we've got it. All right, we're right. Okay, so let's grab that, and we're just going to paste that function in here because we actually do need to mock it, and it needs to exist. So it's just basically writing an output of a string. Yeah, it's just writing an output of a string. Okay, so sweet. So what we can mock is we can just actually run it through it and then mock it that way. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to execute this, bring this into memory, like so. And now we're going to things. So if I've got my content should still exist. Sweet. So what we can do now is we can just quickly run that line. I'm just going to quickly run that line. Okay, sweet. So that didn't actually format it properly. Oh, it's always great when it, the reason why is because it doesn't actually have the URL. So what I need to do is I need to actually set the URL. Oh, did it? Yeah, it doesn't have the URL. So I'm just going to go https www.google.com. See if that works. There we go. Cool. All right, so I've now formatted it. Let's go ahead and export the XML. Demo mocks. I'm just going to, again, just call it a.xml for the time being so I can, we're just going to go format. Format absolute URL dot mock. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we've got now is that. So I'm just trying to. Okay, cool. So what we've now is we've mocked that. So let's go ahead and just return that XML. So we can just go import path demos demo mocks format absolute mock. So essentially we're just mocking that item. I'm actually hang on before you make sure everyone can see my code. Yep, we can see it. Cool. So essentially now we've mocked format absolute URL. We need to now mock GetChild URLs. I'm not a big fan of mocking this one, so what I'm probably going to do, we're going to need to mock it, but that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. So all we need to do here is let's just quickly test to make sure it works. So what we can do, let's call it enumerated links, like so. So we've got all our links, and then I should just be able to pass this straight. Actually, I need to call it. I need to actually bring it into memory. Let's call it. I'm hoping this works and doesn't throw runtime. I'm just hoping that the codes I've abstracted it quite. I've abstracted it properly, and then I can just not worry about writing a unit test for for this specific demo. Now, if I was actually refactoring my code correctly, you'd be writing unit tests for each of your functions. So if you refactored that, and abstracted some code away, you need to write a unit test for that. All right, so yeah, remote certificate's fine. That's fine. So what we can do is just have a look at what's in there. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go ahead and mock that. Path demo mocks, and we'll just call it XML like so we don't run the VS Code line issues. And then we're just going to call child. Let's just call it get. Like so get child urls.mock.xml like that. Sweet. So we've got that mocked. Now the next thing we need to mock is get absolute URLs. So what we can do there, we can just actually just go ahead and run this code like this, and then go ahead and run that. We also need to bring it in, we actually need to execute that function and bring it in memory, like so. See if this works. I'm hoping this works. Let's try that again. Did that have combined links? Yep, let's go ahead and see if that's... Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. Get absolute URLs. What's it taking? Combined links. Combine links. I'm just going to refactor that, put that there, like so. So let's go ahead and rerun that. So we should have a whole bunch of links. There we go. Cool. All right, so what we can do now, oops, don't want that, close that. What we can do now is let's go ahead and mock that. Path, again, demo/demo mocks slash get a.xml. So there's all our mocks, which is really good. So essentially you can mock pretty much whatever you want. So another one we're going to mock with another test is we're not going to mock anything and see what happens. I think it's going to break, but this is just kind of proves the point that when you write your unit tests, you can use this to kind of follow or work out what's working and what's not working. So let's go and we will go get .mock.xml, like so. We actually can get rid of, we can actually simplify this because we don't need to, we can just say invoke web request mock because we've abstracted the others away. So we're just mocking the simple commandlets themselves, which makes it much easier to read. Obviously, we're just going to ignore the fact that we've abstracted them away. So now we've done that, let's actually just simplify our code. So just go ahead and run that, get that, .mock.xml, absolute URL. So we'll just go ahead and copy that and copy that again. So our standard execution should actually have all this executed. So it's fairly easy. Format absolute URLs, get absolute URLs. Yep. Should actually, to be honest, it should be get absolute URL, but we're just going to, actually we're going to refactor that. And then I'm going to fix this because get absolute URLs is not a valid name. So we're just going to go get absolute URL, like so. We've got format absolute URL. We're going to get child URL. I'm just going to refactor that. Like so. So we've got get child URL. And what we can do here is we can go get child URL. So we've mocked all our XML data. So now we can actually just go ahead and test it. So what we actually just need to do is we now just need to get URL links like so. Pass it a URL of test. We don't actually care, or it actually is using the URL, but because we're mocking, it shouldn't be an issue. No, it's not going to be an issue because we're mocking. There's no issue with that. And then we can write we can assert. So if there's a couple of asserts that we need to do here, we can actually validate the script execution firstly. So let's make sure that we actually have all our items have executed correctly. So we're going to just basically say it should have called invoke web request, and we're just going to go assert mock called, command name, invoke web request. Times, and it should be up exactly once. It shouldn't be any more than once. It should just be simply the first time. It should have also called each of these subsequent. It should have called FormatAbsolute URL again. Now this one's obviously we don't really care about how many times it. We don't really care about how many times it's actually called it. What we're actually interested in is has it actually called it. So we're just going to go times, and we're going to use the times parameter, which is basically anything greater than the amount. So times at least 1, which is fine. We're also going to test that GetChild URL was called exactly once. So let's go ahead and grab that. Shouldn't get rid of those colons because I don't like that. It should have also should have called exactly once get absolute URL. Now, one of the other things that it can potentially have done, we also need to actually validate to an extent. I'm not going to actually go and test the output because the output's going to be so different. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say output should contain a PowerShell object. And what I'm I'm just going to test the properties of the object and that's actually outputted that. So essentially it's yeah, that's the way that I'm going to do it. So when you call get absolute URL, it will output an original and a enumerated URL. So that's what we're going to be actually testing for. So what we can actually do here, we can actually put multiple assertions within the same it block. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just using the on 128 as just a bit of a reference guide. So we should say result dot original URL should not be null. Result dot enumerated URL should not be null. Now we could actually probably write it another way. We could actually probably just say result dot get member member, and we should say we can just say members, and then we can just say let's just run a quick get member on something. Process. We can just say just trying to think what the best way to write this would be. We could say members dot where oops. We can say where dot contains, and then we can just say we could say there are two items which are original URL and enumerated URL, like so. And then basically from that we can go properties. Actually, we're gonna actually get rid of that. We're gonna bring that and put that inside the act. And we're gonna say properties dot count should be 2. the output, it should contain, output should contain PowerShell objects, original URL, and enumerated URL, like so. And that should conclude our test. So let's go ahead and run this and see what actually happens. So first we've got a error in the context block, file not found because it can't find GetAbsolute URL. Because we've got a double mock on the extension there. So let's fix that up. Let's go ahead and clear this. I'm just going to restart PowerShell. G'day, Mr. Demon Wolf. So if we go ahead and run this again. Okay, so we've got, it's called that, should have called that, but we didn't get that. Now, I don't know if this is working correctly, so I'm just going to quickly drop a breakpoint on that. Just have a quick look at the members. I think this is missing property name after reference operator. Of course, that old shenanigan. So essentially, I just need to wrap this inside it. Just strictly, I just need to wrap it inside an array. I thought I could get away with it, but I don't think I can. And it's still not working. Okay, I'm actually, this is driving me bonkers because at the end of the day, I don't really like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to refactor this, and we're just going to make this better. So I'm just going to do it this way. So, what have you been up to, mate? So we've got original URL, and we're just going to say should not be null. Not the best. I could validate it, but we're just going to quickly do this. Okay, let's go ahead and run that. So we should have all passing tests. Great. Now, what's the best thing we need to do from this now is, the best thing. The thing what we need to test now is we need to make sure that the test is going to be a failing test. So what we can do is let's go ahead and just put an S there. I want to fail this specific aspect out. We know that we've called this, so that's fine. Let's change that to 0. Let's actually fail our test out completely, and let's just make the times like 100. I need to make sure that this test is working is exactly what it should be. There we go, perfect. So the test is failing, which is good. So now we know that this is a good test. So I test the past again. What is the next type of code execution we have here? So we've got standard execution. Now let's go ahead and let's do an empty URL. Oh, actually, yeah, an empty URL, an invalid URL. Now, this is going to be interesting because I actually think this is going to throw a full-on, this is going to throw a massive error. So what we're probably going to need to do, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So essentially, what we're going to do here is let's go ahead and build our items out. So we've got all our items mocked in. So what we can do here is coding for my version 4 of ShareX Uploader, getting ready for changes at work. So what changes at work you've got going? What we got here is Invoke Web Requests. We're going to actually mock it, and what we're going to do is return nothing. I don't think that's actually going to be, I'm just thinking, will ever return nothing? No, it's going to return, we're going to get it to return a terminating error. All the others, we're just going to basically not mock. So let's find out what actually happens here. We're moving to some parts to third party plus ETH. Okay, yep, nice. Nice. So what we've got happening here is, this is going to be a very interesting assertion. It should throw a terminating error. So we're going to basically should throw so let's go ahead and do this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say upgrading Office 365 to E3. Yeah, nice. It's a big job. Do you guys are you guys running group-based licensing? So what we're going to do here is we're going to say should throw a terminating error. We're going to say just going to do our item here, get URL links. We're going to paste that like so. And then we're going to go should. Oh, I don't really care. I just want to actually, to be honest, I don't really care. I just want it to say should throw. So essentially, it's just it should throw a terminating error. If it doesn't, we've got a problem. Everything else should not be executed. So we're just going to basically assert that they haven't been called. This is going to show a failing test. That doesn't need to exist because it's just not going to have, actually output should, it's just not going to have an output at all because it's a terminating error. I want to, we had our email only plan, which I think we're doing from starting from the ground up, I think. We want to remove the LLC part from the BV. So LLC, can you clarify what LLC and BV are, sorry? So what we can do is, should throw an error. Let's go ahead and run it. And it's thrown, it hasn't. It actually has thrown a terminating error, which is great. But it hasn't called at it. It's still called FormatAbsolute URL. So there are some issues with that code, with our code. So we actually need to fix our code here. So this is thrown a terminating error. Well, it's actually technically a non-terminating error. So what we're going to actually do here is let's just go error action. Let's just go error. We're just going to see if that, we're going to put an error action stop, and let's see if that fixes it. It hasn't, so I'm going to now drop a breakpoint. I'm going to debug with PowerShell. I'm going to, what the hell is going on here, Wise? I thought I had a little JSON file. Okay, so what we got here, a limited liability company, corporate structure in the United States where owners are not personally liable for the company's debts or liabilities. Limited liability companies are hybrid entities that combine the characteristics of a corporation of those partnership and corporation. A BV is a private company with limited liability in Dutch. Oh, okay, yep. That's going to be a bit of a tough one. Oh, that's going to be tough. Ugh. Ugh. So what do you got in plans for PowerShell? Like, are you gonna any sort of PowerShell going to be happening, or like what's going to be on the agenda for this year? So I'm just going to go ahead and remove my breakpoints, and we're going to drop a breakpoint. Well, actually, we can do it this way. What we can do is, if we know that's there, let's just go ahead and put a try there, catch there. That's time. And we're just going to go throw like so. I'm actually wanting to throw a terminating error. I do not want the code to execute. Yeah. Okay, you did not declare a mock of FormatAbsolute URL. Oh, my bad. Okay, that is, I just need to undo all this. I didn't read the error. So I actually need to mock format. I need to keep these mocked. So I'm going to mock those because we can then track it. So they shouldn't return something, but they might. Netherlands, so may as well move there. Lol. I was gonna say that's always the funny part. All right, so we've got standard execution's broken because the path is completely monged, I think. What the hell did I do there? Could not find the path. OneDrive's demo mocks invoke web request mock. Oh my god, this is the thing that drives me absolute bonkers, is it changes the friggin' path. So I need to actually just amend the path. There we go. Okay, so we've got a failing error. Fantastic. It's actually thing. I was asking you, how's the PowerShell scripting? For me, PowerShell's actually really good. I've got a lot of projects going on at the moment, and a lot of them I've just come off the back of projects with automating stuff. So this year is going to be a very interesting year because obviously I'm flying to the US. So I've got to do a presentation at the summit. I'll talk on the summit. So there's a lot of different things that are happening for me. One of the things I've just done is I finished creating a private PowerShell gallery within my organization. I'm literally 99% there. All I've got to do now is run the deployment script across all my all the machines that actually want to have my modules, or actually have the templating module installed, and then basically that project is technically done. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff that we've got on the roadmap as well. So a lot of, but it's going to be busy. I'm going to be absolutely flat stick next week when I'm back at work. I've got so much work lined up for me. So there's one of my clients. We're going to be running a whole bunch of EWS work, getting them over the line with that. Then we're going to do a whole bunch of preach work with all the schools. So yeah, a lot of automating happening in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, all right. So that's invalid URL. So we know that basically that test is working. So our next test that we need to check is what happens if we'll say we've got, let's actually return nothing from child URL and absolute URL. Also, yeah, no child URL. So let's just say no child URLs. So what we can do here is we can just basically go mock with, and we're just going to say, well, we don't even need to mock with anything. We can just say get child URL. So here, so now we've mocked it with that. What we can do is we can assert that, yep, we can actually just grab our first set of tests from stand execution. Because it shouldn't throw terminating errors. So if it does, we've got an issue with our code. If it doesn't, fantastic. So we're going to mock get child URL. We're going to basically mock absolute URL. We don't really, just looking at where format get absolute URL. Okay. We're actually going to mock. We're not going to actually mock either of them. No child URLs were enumerated. So what we're going to do is just mock get child URL with nothing. No child URLs were returned. So we're just testing all facets of the code. So we've got test. That can stay the same. So invoke web requests, FormatAbsolute URL, GetChild URL will return nothing. Actually, it will still return because it's going to get mocked regardless. And then we're going to test get absolute URL. So get absolute URL should be mocked. And what we're actually going to do now is we're actually going to validate that only the links that was returned from enumerated links. Oh, can we actually do that? It should still return something. So there should still be something that's returned. No trouble. We're just going to say standard execution, executin, no child URLs. Like so. So we can do that. That should be fine. And then we can actually do Yeah, I think that's actually going to really be it. So let's go ahead and run that. Yep, okay, all our tests pass. So again, what do we need to do to make sure that it's working is we basically need to actually fail the test. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're actually, what we're actually testing here is, we're testing this specific element having no content returned from child URLs and still getting an actual output. So let's just flip it and make sure that the output is actually returning something, which it is. It's actually, you can see it's returning an output. So perfect. So that test is working. So I think that's going to conclude this specific demo for Invoke Web Request. There is a couple more. I think there could potentially be, if we run, I'm just looking at the code. If we run, we could actually, no, let's mock, okay, we're going to write one more test. Let's remove, I just literally forgot the function name. And I minimized it. Let's go ahead and remove mocks for that, for GetAbsolute URL. So we can actually just do the same thing. Let's just grab, to be honest, it doesn't really matter whether we mock GetChild URL right now. We're just actually interested in that it's going to return nothing. Because there will be nothing to return, the function doesn't exist. So we don't even really need to format the absolute URL, do we? Yeah, we will. We'll need to format the absolute URL. So what we can do here is, let's go ahead and test it. So should contain PowerShell objects. Yep. Output shouldn't contain PowerShell objects. I'm just going to fix my spelling up. One of the other things I'm thinking about doing next year after the summit is I'm also thinking about writing an actual ebook for 101. So basically all the content that we've covered, but it's just going to be a free ebook that people can download and kind of get themselves stuck into it. Yeah, so that's one of the ideas that I've got lined up for next year as well. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, so that's working. So no child URLs. I'm just gonna URLs also. We're just going to remove. So it output shouldn't contain PowerShell objects. It should contain nothing. Actually, we'll just say that. So let's go ahead and run that. So you can see that that's passing. Okay, so what do we need to do to fail this test? Let's basically say should not be null, or should be not null, like so. We need to flip our output because that's what we're actually testing. So let's go ahead and test that. And okay. Oh, it helps if I actually put the assertions in the right spot. Should not be null. Expected null, but actually got the same value. Okay, so the reason why we got the same value is because child URL is being mocked. And it is actually should output something. So this test is actually, yeah, actually it should be null. But let's actually drop a breakpoint here and have a look at the output or result just to make sure that there's no shenanigans going on. Okay, we can actually just say result should be null. So let's go ahead and rerun that. So you can see that's passed. So let's go ahead and fail it. It should not be null. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's basically a passing test. So that pretty much concludes this specific demo. So we've wrote a whole bunch of pester tests. We'll just quickly go through. So we've got a standard execution. We've mocked the code. Now, one of the things we had to do was abstract away a few of those key components so we could actually test our code. We will cover this in a later demo, but it's just worth noting that that was one of the things we did. So we mocked our functions, and then basically we acted on that, and then we wrote our citations, and that was obviously for a standard execution and a valid URL. So it should have thrown a terminating error, which it did. We don't care about, in this instance, we don't care about what it returned because we just care about it actually throwing an error. And then basically you got a child URL. So we're just basically no child URLs and no and removing get absolute URL. So that's pretty much that for scenarios. So let's we don't really need to have an intermission because we're just going to be smashing this out. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to talk about parameterized testing. So parameterized testing is a essentially, it's a way of writing your pester test to make it more reusable, making your code a lot more reusable than having to repeat a lot of your code. Now, there's a couple of things that we can do with parameterized testing. So remember, it's still PowerShell, so you can basically write code to test your code. But basically, and you can obviously you can reduce your complexity by doing that. So there are a couple of things. Obviously, like I said, you can reduce your complexity. It makes your code more maintainable. It's more accurate and it's faster. So think of it as like it's essentially the same thing as having a function within PowerShell. You don't want to have multiple tests using the same variables, and then basically have to redeclare that over and over again. It just makes for bad tests, and it makes for bad tests, and also makes for bad maintenance of those tests. So the whole thing is to be able to actually think about, okay, if I'm writing a test, how can I actually make my test easier to read and understand, at the same time making it more maintainable and easier for everyone to follow along. Now, one thing is that this can be a definite rabbit hole. So you don't want to go down the rabbit hole and start writing all this crazy code to do it, because then you kind of are moving away from the whole simplicity of a test, and you actually are rewriting code, which is kind of a bad thing. You want to basically keep it as simple as possible, and it makes it so much easier. One of the biggest things as well is that obviously when you're running a parameterized test, you don't have to repeat that test over and over again, which means it's also faster, and that's one of the really, really, really important things as well. Now, let's just put it with a practical example. So imagine that you have a function that's adding two numbers together. So you need to test multiple inputs. So now these inputs could be the positive, they could be negative. So rather than actually having to write individual tests, since they have the similar acetations or the same acetations, you can actually just write a parameterized test that accepts multiple inputs. So then you can basically have a loop that basically says, okay, test this, test this, test this, test this, test this, and then you're done. And that's a much easier way of maintaining doing it than rather than having to write multiple tests. So it's a really, really effective way. And it really, when you're writing parameterized tests, it makes your code so much easier to manage. It just saves so much time. So let's go ahead and actually look at some parameterized tests. So what we've got here is, let's go and have a look at our parameterized test. So what we've got here is, let's take multiply something. So multiply something was, I'm actually just going to drag this down. I'm just going to restart PowerShell and drag this down. So multiply something was a parameterized test that it was a test that we wrote earlier. And if we quickly go back, let's just see if we can find it. Here it is here. So this is multiply something. So initially you could see here we wrote a test for each of the different types of multiplication. So we got positive numbers, we had a third number in there, we had some other little bits and pieces there. But the thing is that essentially we can parameterize that and simplify our code. So what we've got here is, let's go ahead to our parameterized test. We've got the same function, same execution, but this time we're actually going to use parameterized tests. So here, what we've got here is we've got our describe block. And now you notice that the first thing within the describe block is I've created a parameter. I've created a parameter array of hash tables. And within each of those hash tables, I've provided a description. I have a params block, and then I have a result. Now, this is just how I've structured my parameterized tests. When you parameterize testing in C# and things like that, it's so much easier. PowerShell doesn't, Pester doesn't have the full capacity at the moment to be able to do this. So you kind of have to write a bit of code to kind of be able to support it. But essentially what we've got here is we've got our parameters. So here we've basically declared each of our specific inputs that we were actually wanting to pass. And then from that, we're actually going to use our for each to iterate through those items. So obviously we've got our for each parameter and within parameters. You can see here, I'm dynamically now building each test group by specifying the parameter description. So remember, this is what it will print. So it'll basically print testing positive numbers. So you can see it'll print out that. And then basically we have our standard test, and it's a very basic test. So we're going to use, but rather than actually writing any sort of crazy test, what we're actually going to do here is we're just going to declare our parameters. So we just got our params by passing the parameter and then the params key, which is basically, and again, that's another hash table. But this hash table is actually the splattable items that we're passing in. And all we're doing is we're splatting it in. So we're actually splatting in our actual values in for our test. So you can see here we've got a whole bunch of different things. We're testing positive numbers, so 1 times 2. We're doing negative and positive numbers, negative numbers with the number 3 parameter, positive numbers with the number 3 parameter, positive negative numbers with the number 3 parameter. And we're just splatting it in. And then what we're actually doing here is we're just testing the output. That's all we're testing. So, and how we're doing that is basically we've declared here what the result should be. So this is basically, and then we just pass it in. So it's pretty straightforward. So obviously result should be parameter.result. So remember, everything is nest, we're following the nest, the scope inheritance. So essentially this is all accessible within that. So go right ahead. We can basically pass our parameter expected result, and we're good to go. And that's pretty much it. And this is why parameterized testing is so good, because we can basically write our parameters. And when you have large amount of parameters, sorry, I'm just dropped something under here. Ow! Stood on it. So when we have a large amount of parameters, essentially we can just go ahead and pass them straight in. Good to go. And it simplifies our tests. And you can see here that makes it so much easier to follow. And you can have a large amount here. I've got parameterized tests that are used for PS scripting. Oh, sorry, not PS scripting. PS script analyzer. So basically it goes through and checks a whole bunch of different things with PS script analyzer. So that's another way that we ran our parameterized tests. So let's go ahead and run this. And you can see here, let's go ahead and bring that up. So you can see here, that's how it structures our test. So we're still writing PowerShell to actually do it, but we're actually writing very simple PowerShell. So that is pretty much a demo of a parameterized test. But before we do that, we need to test, is it actually working properly? So we can actually go ahead, let's actually just put a 0 on the end of everything, because that's the easiest way to test it right now. We're just testing to make sure it fails. So let's go ahead and rerun our code. And you can see here, now we've got failing tests. So this test is perfectly fine. This is a good test. And as you can see, it's simpler because it's a parameterized test. I'm just going to remove all the zeros. And then we're going to rerun our test again. I'm just going to restart PowerShell. Go ahead and rerun it. And you can see here that they're passing. Perfect. All right, so that's basically a parameterized tests. So I do have, so we're going to actually write a parameterized test. So what we've got here is we've got a math function here. So essentially, I'm just going to go ahead and restart that. We've got add something. So we're going to actually write parameterized tests for add something. Very basic test. You can see here it's only taking 2 inputs. And then we have this optional CSV path. So let's actually go ahead and write our parameterized test. So let's go ahead and write our test. So first thing, test. We're going to write our describe. So we're going to basically do the same thing. We're just going to say testing, add something. Like so. We're going to give it some tags. We're going to go unit, and then we're going to go parameter. And then we're just going to... Now, within our describe block, we have multiple test groups. So we're actually going to need to build our parameters out. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we're actually going to specify an array, like so. Now, you can have this as a CSV file. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a... it doesn't have to be declared in there. It's just easier to be, whatever you want. So what we're going to do now is we're going to basically pass our hash table. And remember, our hash table has different key values. So we're going to have our description. So let's just call it context. Testing. We're going to also have... I'm just thinking about the mocking. And then we're going to have, so I'm just going to pass the results. So we're just going to be adding something. So we're just going to say is 2. We're going to have our parameters. So we're just going to go number 1 is equal to 1. Number 2 is equal to 1, like so. And then we're going to... Now, because we have a import CSV in here, I'm thinking about the parameter set and how we're actually going to be able to, we need to write a custom logic in the code to be able to work out, do we need to test for an assertion? Because we need to assert if this is called, if we're actually passing it a number, or if we're passing it CSV path. So what we can do here, we're going to actually put a mock in here. We're just going to put an empty, you're going to see what we're going to do here. We're going to put an empty mock item in here. I'm just thinking, how can I do this? I could just, yep, this is what we said. What we're going to do is we're going to, I'm just thinking about what the easiest way to do this. I'm thinking about the test. Okay, let's try it this way. So essentially what my idea is, I'm going to have an empty mock. So we're going to have a script block, which basically we can just dot source in to actually do what we to do. We can dot source in using PowerShell to actually run the mock code if we actually need to run it. So we're just going to go testing negative numbers. So our result, let's say, is 0. So 1 minus 1 is 0. Or a negative 1 plus 1 is 0, like so. Actually, no, negative 1 minus plus negative 1 will be negative 2. Like so. Let's go ahead and test positive and negative numbers, like so. So we've got negative 1 and 1, that should equal 0. And then we're going to basically have our CSV path. Now the CSV path is going to mock a custom object. Excuse me, sorry. So it's going to mock testing positive, path with positive numbers. So what actually we can do here is just go ahead and copy all this because we're going to now test CSV path. Like so. So we're going to test CSV path with positive numbers. And now what we're actually going to do is our parameters are going to change slightly. So what we need to do here is our parameters, if we look at the function itself, the parameters now need to be CSV path. So what we need to do here is we just need to change this to be test, like so. So we can just dot source that in. And then we're going to need to add a mock. So we can just go mock command. Is it mock command? Sorry, mock command, perfect. And what we're going to do is we're going to mock it in here. So we're going to go mock with our command name. And we're going to import CSV, mock with, and then we're basically a custom script block. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to return a return like so. We're just going to go PS custom object like this. I really am not a fan of this. I think we can refactor this test, but we're just going to write this way. And then we're just going to say number 1 and number 2. So it's 1 and 1 like that. We might as well just make it single line to make it easier. And we can actually make that a single line. And then we're just going to keep that like so. So we'll do it that way. Mock with. And then we will need to nest that script block. Hang on, where's that script block? So we're going to mock command. And then we're going to nest that. And then we're going to put that there like that. And then we're going to put that like that. Yep, so we're going to mock it like so. So then what we can do is just copy and paste, remove that, and then we can parameterize. So now we're going to have -1 and 1. We're going to have -2. So that'll be -1, -1. So we've wrote our parameters now. So what we can do is let's go ahead and iterate through them. So what we can do is we can actually now go for each parameter and parameters. Then we can go context parameter dot context. And then within here, we can actually, we've got our act, arrange, and assert. Arrange, act, assert. And then what we can do here is we can say parameter, yep, so we can go dot source parameter dot mock, like so. So we actually can dot source mocks in as needed. We can then build our result. We can go add, does it add something? Yes, so we can go add something, oops. We can go add something here. Then we can go at, oh, should we need to actually parameter, declare parameters for add something like so. Then we go parameter dot like so, and then we can do that. So basically we're just going to splat it in, act like so, and then we can assert. it, and then we can go, and then we can say should contain, and then we can say that. Sorry, I'm just thinking for a sec. Yep, so we can say should contain that. So we're just going, actually, I'm just going to put it inside of a nested sub-expression. And it should contain parameter dot result. And then we can just basically write our test. So we can say result should be parameter dot result. Now, if we run this, let's go ahead and run this. Oops. We've got a few issues. A null key is not allowed in a hash literal. So that's at line 38. That's line 38. Let's just get error. So I'm just going to restart PowerShell. Let's restart PowerShell so I can get a, this helps me quickly articulate what's going on. So if we do that, line 38, where's line 38? Okay, hash literal, what am I missing? I'm missing something here. A null key is not allowed in a hash literal. I think it doesn't like our mocks. I don't think it likes our mocks. So what we can do is just quickly just run that, see if that works. Oh, whoops. I've done this so many times. Dollar, it's not a dollar. So let's go ahead and rerun our tests. Okay, we got a fail, whole bunch of failing tests, we got passing tests. Okay, so error code in the context block, mock command is not recognized, name of function, script file. Yeah, it is. It should exist. Well, it's not sourcing it in, so it'll run in the current context. Okay, so we need to actually drop a breakpoint on that, work out if there's something there. I might be going over the top here, so that's why I'm kind of thinking about it might just, yeah, we'll go quickly mock command. I just quickly want to see. I thought it was mock command. I'm literally having a memory blank right now. Why is it doing that? Oh, it's not mock command. It's mock Michael. Jeez. Oh my goodness. What? No, I literally having a bit of a brain fart there. So we're just mocking that in. So let's go ahead and rerun that. That's just to make sure that's working. Yep. Okay. Perfect. Let's stop that. Let's restart PowerShell. Let's removal breakpoints. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so we've got some errors here. Validation, the test path, literal path, dot validation for did not value with test, did not return true. Okay, so we forgot to do something, and that was basically mocking test path. So we need to mock test path as well, so that's fine. So what we need to do here, so we can actually just mock command name test path like so. So we can put all our mocks in like so, like this. So now if we go ahead and rerun it, we've mocked them. Let's go and see what errors we got. Validation for it failed. Okay, so it's not mocking, maybe? Oh, sorry. it needs to mock with, it needs to return true. Sorry, I'm not particularly thinking at the moment. Okay, so essentially we're going to need to make it return true like so, because we actually need to mock that test path is actually true. So let's go ahead and try this again. Man, I'm having some serious brain farts today. So let's go ahead and rerun this. Bring it up. So there you go. So you can see all our we've got passing tests. But that doesn't mean we have a passing test. We need to fail our test to make sure it's passing. So what we need to do here is we need to fail, let's say, let's just actually add 10. We'll make that 10. Let's add a 0 there. Let's add a 0 there. Let's add a 1. Let's add a 1 there. Let's add a 0 there and 0 there. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically failing the output to make sure that our test fails correctly. So let's go ahead and restart PowerShell. Go ahead and run it. And we should just have a complete failures. Yep, so there's no passing test. Fantastic. That consists as a good test. G'day, Bloody Valley. How you going, mate? So what we're doing now is I'm just going to undo all our changes. And that is parameterized testing. So essentially what we did here was we basically have use parameterized testing to simplify it. Now, there's actually other things that we can test here, because even though we're adding something, if you want to really push the limits of what it's capable of actually adding, well, then let's actually start adding decimals. So think of it as, okay, there might be another extreme situation where you might have a potential decimal. So let's try that. Let's try testing decimals. Positive numbers. Now, necessarily, I don't think you'll need to go and do positive, negative, positive, negative. We just need to do decimals itself. So let's just make it 3. And we're going to make our decimals 1.5 and 1.5. Now, I know this is going to equal 4 because of the parameter, but this is the whole premise of a parameterized test. So rather than having to rewrite the entire test, we can make an amendment to our parameters and then basically get to test our output. So you can see there we're testing decimal. It also helps if I can actually spell decimal. God, is that how you spell decimal? It doesn't look right. Thank you, Bloody Valley. As always. So what we can do here is so we know that our test should be that, but it's not. So this is the kind of situation where you want to kind of be able to articulate, or you want to be able to quickly add something and you can quickly do it. So let's go ahead and fix our test. So we're going to actually make it so it has the ability to do that. So we're actually going to give it a double. Like so, like so. Let's go ahead and rerun our tests. And you can see there now we've got testing decimal positive numbers should contain 3, and that's passed. So that's a really good, one of the real benefits of having parameterized testing. So we can just simple test, everything is stored within the parameters. So, and then obviously with the CSV, that's the same thing. So we obviously need to be able to test that. But that's pretty much concludes parameterized testing. So I just want to make sure there's no other test demos I need to go through. No, sweet. All right. So let's quickly jump back into slides, and we'll quickly talk about refactoring. So I talked about refactoring existing code for tests. Now, one of the big things is that you need to be able to make your code to be able to be testable. So there's always the question that gets asked, how do I refactor my code for tests? Like it's something that I asked myself, and I asked a lot of people, was how do I do this? Because at the end of the day though, where do I start? Like what do I even start with? And this is one of the things that I kind of helped myself articulate it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to simplify our code down to the simplest denominator. If it's something if there's something that's basically you've got multiple code execution, it's a really complicated function, you need to simplify your code. Simplifying your code as much as possible simplifies your tests. if your code's incredibly complicated, writing tests is going to be really, really complicated. So the key thing here is to basically abstract away all those kinds of complicated pieces and simplify them into their own segment, into their own function or their own class object, so that basically you can write a single test for that. So you're not testing all these complicated test cases. You're testing this specific function. You're mocking those specific those calls, and then basically coming back with whatever. So it helps you articulate what's the best way to be able to do that. So that's one of the key things with simplifying your code. The second thing is, if you're using multiple commandlets that have different mocks, you have to abstract away. So think of it as, if you're using Invoke Web Requests, that's doing an Invoke Web Request here, and you need to mock that functionality where you have a different kind of functionality that's using Invoke Web Requests, you can't differentiate between the two. So they need to be mocked. That needs to be they need to be abstracted away so that you can actually test that. So that was one of the things that we came with the scenario before. I actually need to abstract away subsequent pieces of code and functionality within my my actual function, because it was just not feasible, and it would have made testing more difficult. And once you've done all these kinds of things, you can then start writing your test. So it really just kind of comes down to those kind of three things. Just simplify, and if you're using multiple, if you're using the you're using the same command with multiple code, with different code execution bits and pieces, essentially you need to be able to actually abstract that away. So, like I said, so there's some things that are kind of really, really important to remember. So the first thing is, you just need to refactor your code to support tests. You don't, and it's as needed. So don't go and drop everything and then just rewrite all your code to write tests, because you're going to be there all day. It's easier to basically just do it as you need it. So if you're adding functionality, you might want to add that add unit tests to that functionality, and then basically maybe you want to write tests for the parent functionality and might want to refactor some of that code. That's an awesome way to do it. This makes your code a lot more readable and maintainable. It forces you to actually refactor your code to make it easier. So one of the things is that when you're writing tests, you can write tests. Once you've completed your tests, you can actually refactor your code to make it more cleaner, and then you can rerun your tests to see if those refactoring is caused any issues. That is post, but because you're actually refactoring existing code, it's actually really, really good as well, because you're actually forcing you to actually make better code choices and thinking about how to actually write good code. That is also going to be something that we're going to cover next year when with the PowerShell 102 series. Actually, no, this year we're actually in December. We're in January. So also, in situations, make sure you abstract away that functionality. Abstracting away functionality is not a bad thing. It can make things a little bit too complicated. It can make things a really kind of, you're going to have nested functions within functions and going here and going here and going here. But it really makes it easier to test. And remember, simpler is better. And this is the thing that kind of was segue into it, which is that the simpler your code is, the easier it is. And like I said, for existing code, just refactoring your code is better suited for just ongoing maintenance. So don't just go out and write unit tests. Go out, refactor your code, write your tests to support the code, and then test. Then you have that specific segment done, and then do little bits and pieces at a time. Don't go out and rewrite it all, because you'll be there for weeks. So let's go ahead and start refactoring some code. So let's go and do that. So here we've got do math, and it's a pretty complicated function here. I've wrote it to be deliberately bad, actually. It's essentially we need to refactor this to be able to actually be optimized for testing. So there's a couple of issues. So the first thing is the code block. Like, look at the code. The code can be simplified. This can be really, really simplified here. But before that, let's actually quickly go through the code. So we're doing some math. The functions do math, okay? And here we basically have some default values of number 1 and 2, so that just accepts 0. We're validating the operator, so you can pass an operator, and basically you can go number 1, operator number 2. So that's pretty straightforward. We've got some weird abstractions. We've got some weird code in here. So essentially, number 1 or number 2, if they're 0, and the operator is a divide, throw an error. And for some reason it's prompting, so we actually need to do something there. So essentially, this code obviously is comment needs to be fixed up because it's not correct. And we need to actually, actually no, it is throwing, it's writing an error. It's not technically throwing an error. So it's saying number cannot be divisible by 0, and then it's printing out, enter your numbers in until they actually are valid. You can also see here we've got some code here to determine the operator, and then we're actually performing the action. We're performing the calculation and then returning it. So the code block can be simplified. That's the first thing. A check's being done. A check's being done here with numbers that are divisible by 0. And there are multiple read hosts for different values. We can't mock, which means we need to abstract away. We can test, and then how do we test a failing read host? That's actually going to be a really tough one. So currently at the moment, what happens is if we need to test a failing number right now, it will actually fail. Because what's going to happen is if we put in 0, it'll infinitely loop. So we need to fix that up as well. So I've kind of just got the updated function here. So let's go ahead and start rewriting it, refactoring it. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to abstract away some of this. So let's go ahead and just have a quick look here. So the first thing is we've got read host. So let's go ahead. We need to abstract away read host, and we need to abstract it away from read number 1 and number 2. So what we need to do is we need to go get number 1. I'm just going to say get number 1. We're going to put parameters in here. We're just going to say it's a integer. Let's go double. Let's make it interesting. Like so. So we've done that. Let's just space that out. So what we're going to need to do here is we need to put our code in here. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and copy and paste it. And we can put our code in there. We don't need number 2, we just need number 1. Now, we're accepting a number 1, but actually, we actually don't need parameters at all. We're actually just getting it. So it doesn't actually accept parameters. It's just a dumb method, a dumb function. So we're just going to go ahead here, and we got number 1. So we've got do until number 1. Great. But I want to go one step further, and I'm actually just going to try and cast that as try. So we're going to go double try pass number 1, and then we're going to give it a var. Now I just need to have a quick look at this method because I know that we are doing something. I just need to have a quick look at it in PowerShell. Yeah, we need a ref. That's what we need to specify as a ref. Okay, so what we can do here is we can say our reference is equal to 0, and then we're just going to specify ref as a ref, like so. Like that. So cool, we've got that. Now, what we need to do is we actually need to try pass this. Like this, and then basically what we're going to say is ref is not equal to 0. Now, if it's null, actually, we can actually probably just do this. We can actually say until double like so, and then what we can do is we can then just do a write output. So let's actually see what this does. Let's actually just quickly execute this to make sure that we're good. So if we go get number 1, that's not working, that's not working, that's working, perfect. So it will pass once that's good. So let's just pass something else. Cool. All right, sweet. So we've got number 1 now. So we've abstracted that function away. So let's go ahead and abstract away get number 2. I wonder if we can just make it as an alias. I wonder if you can mock an alias. We're just going to do it for the time being. So essentially we got number 2. Yeah, we're going to do it that way. So essentially we've got number 1, number 2. So we've abstracted them away. So let's go ahead and clean that up. Now we actually don't need to, we can actually get rid of this do loop because we're already dealing with it within the function itself, so we can fix that up. Or is that, and we're going to write an error. Now if number 1 is equal to 0, number 2 is equal to 0, and we're going to make them doubles. Within PScript, it's a functionality of PScript Analyzer. So essentially, when you're writing custom functions, also when you're writing custom stuff of functions within within VS Code, PScript Analyzer is actually what's telling you, hey, it's not a thing. So you can ignore it. Let me just grab PScript function. There's a way you can do it within PScript Analyzer. I just need to find the exclusion rule. Where is it? Exclusions. Suppressing rules. So I'm just going to send this in. So essentially what you can do is you can suppress the rule by finding the specific rule that it is. The rule should be like valid function or something like that. And then essentially what you can do is you can suppress it that way. And that will suppress it. So let's go ahead and we've fixed that specific piece of code up. So we've refactored that. What we need to do now is we actually need to refactor this code. So you can see here we've got if that, else do that. We can just go ahead and clean that up. We don't need that. That's just redundant. So we can remove the else because that code, I kind of want it to be executed anyway. So now we're validating the operator. Can we fix this up anymore? No, I don't think so. I think that's it. No worries. No worries, North End Trooper. So what we can do is, I'm just looking at this. So I've got if number 1 or 2 is equal to 0, and if the operator is that or that. Okay, we can actually fix this up as well. So I'm not a fan of having multiple ORs like this, especially if you've got that. So what we can do is if we're testing for multiple operators, we can just say contains like so, and then we can just wrap it in an array. Just makes it a little easier. So we can just do this, and then we can just put a modulus there like that. And then we can say, get rid of all that and simplify our code there. I think I removed one too many parentheses. Yep. It also helps if I can spell. contains. So essentially we're just using the contains operator to actually validate if it's either one of these. So it's an easy way to do it. Just makes it a little cleaner, makes it a lot more readable. And then we can write output. So I think that's pretty much that. So the first thing we need to do now is we actually need to write tests for get number 1, get number 2. So, but before we do that, we need to fix these now. So we're not able to actually test this yet because we need to be able to actually validate what happens if we put invalid inputs. So we're going to give it a retry counter. And so this is going to be able to allow us to actually break out of the loop if there's multiple invalid inputs. So, and we can say or retry counter is greater than 10. Like so. So essentially the idea is what happens here is if you put it allows if you put it will only try 10 times before it fails out. Before it tries and returns. So what we can do here is then we can go if retry counter is greater than 10, throw invalid input. So we can do this, and so what it means is that if it exceeds 10 times, it will actually throw a terminating error. Also, what we can do here is we've got retry counter. It allows us, it also allows us to test now, because if you think about it, if we didn't have that code there and we were mocking read host and we were testing with no input to make sure that this specific part of the code is executing correctly, it'll infinitely loop. So we need to actually write our code so that it's actually able to actually exit the loop. So let's go ahead and add that to number 2. Add our retry counter down here. We're just going to add that like that, and then we're just going to replace that with that, and then we're going to do that like so. So essentially we have our 2 things, and realistically there's only really 2 unit tests for both of these, and we can actually even write parameterized tests to test both of them. So let's actually go ahead and do that. Let's go actually do this. So what we need to do is we've got function do math. I'm just going to shrink all that down, and we're going to write our test. So describe. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a parameterized test to actually test our. I'm going to just remove that. Get number 1. So we need to structure our tests accordingly. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go test. Get number, and I'm just going to call it get number X. We can actually write a parameterized test. So they're literally exact same tests. So what we can do is go get parameters. And we're going to go like so. Actually, we're going to declare an array. And within here, we're going to go another hash table. We're going to give it our params. I'm actually just thinking of doing it this way. So we can actually just go get number 1. I'm just thinking about how we're going to test the failing in this, because I know that it does not like script blocks. It's one of the biggest issues with Pester. We're going to give it a go. So we're going to go get number, and then we'll just basically, yep. So we're just going to say get number 1 like so. And that's it. That's our script block. We're going to give it a result. So we're going to give it a mock. So we're going to mock command name, and we're going to go read host. and we're going to give it 1.0. Oh, we're just going to give it 1, like so. And then we're going to give it a result. It should be 1. And then we need to give it a test name. We're going to give it a context name. So we're just going to say testing. I'm literally wondering how am I going to do this because oh yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. Positive, just testing positive, testing integer. So we're going to test integer. With integer, we're going to test testing number 2 with an integer. And then we're going to copy and paste this again, and this is going to be a double now. So 1.5, which should be 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. So that's that. Let's go ahead and write for each. Parameters with values. What am I going to call this? I'm just going to call it standard execution. Standard execution parameters, like so. For each parameter and standard execution parameters. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to arrange and assert. So we're going to act by so we're going to act by mocking. So basically we're just going to go mock dot source the mock. So we're going to go dot parameter dot mock, like so. We're going to basically get our result by dot sourcing in the parameter dot script block, like so. I'm also going to remove the dollars because that's not how we declare a hash table, like so. So we've got script block, and then we can actually write our test. It should, oh, we better probably want to write a context. So we can go, we can actually just go parameter dot context, like so. Wrap that like so, yeah, like so. And then we should say should contain, we'll wrap that in a sub expression. And then we're going to go dot parameter dot mock. Oh no, dot result, like so. And then we're going to go this. Also going to just get rid of that, like so. And then we should go result should be parameter dot result, like so. Let's go ahead and quickly run this, see if this actually works. We need put some curly braces around here. So we got a curly brace there, curly brace there, and I need to put a curly brace here. I'm going to tab that in. We're going to basically tab that in, rerun that. All right, so we got some errors. What do we got? Error code describe block, null keys, and a hash literal. Okay, so I've probably got to, yeah, that's that. Fix that. Let's go ahead and rerun it. Oh, okay, yep. So you can see a context testing get number 2 with double, error code and context block. Cannot convert 1.5 to type system double. Automation to type automation script block. Okay. To N32. Okay, so what's going on here? Mock command name, read host. Oh yeah, okay. So the reason why it's broken is because I actually need to use the mock with, and then basically do this like so. I'm just trying to clean this up a bit. So let's go ahead and put that in there. Mock with 1, we just put 1.5 like so, like that, and then we can go like that. And so let's go ahead and rerun that. Okay, cool. So we've got our parameterized test running. That's fantastic. So let's actually validate that this is working. So I'm just going to stick a 0 on the end. I'm going to put a 1 there. We should have failing tests. Good, we got failing tests, so those tests are good. So that is that specific execution completed. So the next piece of execution we need to do is we need to have invalid execution parameters. So we're going to need to mock read host, and we're just going to return nothing. It doesn't actually need to return anything. Actually, we can just return a string. That's all we really need to return. And we only really need 2 tests. So like so. Get rid of that test. I'm actually thinking I might run this as it. Actually, no, I'm going to write this as its own test. So I'm going to say context testing get number 1 with invalid input. I'm not going to write as a parameterized test. It's just a little too difficult. It also helps if I put range act assert. So we're going to basically be doing that. So essentially, we're going to arrange to have it mock nothing. So we're just going to mock that. We're going to do our active then in our assert. So we're going to say get number 1. And I don't really care about what it throws as long as it should throw. Like so. Actually, it needs to probably be, yep, that's fine. Let's go ahead and just quickly run that, make sure that's working. Okay, yep, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to say should throw like that, see if that fixes it. And cannot convert value test to system. Oh, again, so I made the same mistake that I did before. So we can just go mock with, you know what, we don't even need to do that. We can just mock it with nothing. Let's just mock it with read like that. That's fine. Okay, yep, so there you go. Testing with invalid input, perfect. Then what we need to do here is we should go, it should throw a terminating error, like so. Just go ahead and put that there. Let's go ahead and run that. Test. Okay, perfect. What we need to do is we should put a not there and say, see what happens. So let's go put a not there. Does it work? Yep. Okay, so that test is working. All right, so what we can do is let's just copy this test, paste it here, test number 2 with invalid input. It gets really difficult. The only reason why I didn't want to do parameterized testing is because it gets really difficult here. So it's easier to just do it this way. So if we go ahead and rerun that, we get all our tests. Oh, we got a lot of breaking. Okay, it's probably because I got the not. Yeah, okay, got the not there. So, so if we rerun this again, we should get passing tests. Yep, perfect. All right, so we've tested our testing get number X. So we don't actually need to test that anymore. So we can now just test do math. So let's go ahead and start testing. So we've got a couple of tests to write here. So we're going to just steal the parameterized testing. I'm going to just steal it from the other one here because they're pretty much the same actually. So we're just going to do math. So that's what we're going to do here. So got our parameters. We're just going to testing addition, testing subtraction, testing multiplication, testing division, testing modulus. Like so, I'm just going to get rid of all this. So testing modulus. I can't spell it. Off to Google. Modulus. There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, so essentially, we've got now do math. So let's have a look at what do math needs. So we've got a whole bunch of different things. We need to assert those so we can mock them in now. We don't need to have a mock because that's going to be on the. Now, one of the things I'm going to show is we can actually use the before all. This is actually a script block statement that you can actually use to actually, it will run before any of the tests run. So we can actually do our mocking in that, which makes our mocking so much easier. So we're just going to mock. Oops. Get number 1. And if we I'm just thinking actually, do we actually need that? Oh, I think we actually gonna need to have them in individual tests actually. All right, that's all right. So the reason why we need to have them in individual tests is because we're gonna have different mocks being returned. So that's fine. So all we're gonna do is just go parameters for each parameter and parameters, and then we're gonna go context. And we're going to go parameter dot context, like so. And then we're going to basically go put our test in here. Act, arrange. So we're going to arrange act and assert. So arranging with what are we arranging with? We're arranging with get rid of these mocks. We don't need them. We're going to put our mocks in there. So we're going to put our mocks in here. I'm just thinking. Oh, we're going to need to have them in there. This is a pain in the backside. I don't really like having them in there. I'm just going to mock everything that's a standard input. We're just going to mock with nothing because we're not interested in that. We're only testing the standard code execution here. Once we've tested all that, then we'll test this as the final bit. So what we need to do now is we've got number one, number two, and operator. So number one, I'm just going to give it a capital O, and we're going to give it addition, like so. Then we're going to go subtraction. So 1 minus 1 is 0. 1 plus 1 is 2. Multiplication, we're just going to go 2 times 2 is 4. I'm going to do division, which is going to be, we'll just go 4 divided by 2, which is going to be 2. And then we're going to do a modulus, which is going to be 1. And that should not mock. So what we can actually say here, it shouldn't have called it. So we can say result we can say parameter dot. We actually need to define our params again because the way of splatting works. Dot params. Then we can go do math like so, and then we can assert our response. So it should be sub-expression parameter result curly braces, and then we can go result should be parameter.result like so, like that. So if we go ahead and run this, let's just run our tests. We've got a lot of errors. Missing the argument with mock with. Okay, we didn't need to. Oh, I need to. Oh, that's the reason why. I need to actually dot source my mocks in. So I'm just going to dot source parameter.mock. Let's go ahead and rerun that. So you can see here we've got GetNumber X, so that's all passed. We're doing our test path. Oh, whoops. Actually, it's not right. That should have a remainder of 0. Whoops. Actually, I'll just do 5 because 5 is actually. I should have a. I'm just going to quickly go 5 modulus 2 should be 1. Oops. 5 modulus 2. Yep, perfect. Sweet. So if we go ahead and rerun that, we can see all our tests pass. Fantastic. We've got parameterized testing in. Let's go ahead and fail our test. So we're just going to put a 0 after all that just to make sure it's working correctly. You can see they're failing. We've got failing tests. Great. So we know that our tests are good. Good. Fantastic. All right. So next thing we need to do is we need to test. We've tested this component and this component, but we haven't tested this. So what we're going to do is we're going to mock. I'm not interested in the output. I'm only interested in this. So we're actually going to write, this just only needs a separate test. So we're going to test an invalid input. So essentially, one of the things we also need to do is we need to assert that nothing got called there. So one of the things we can do is we can just assert it should have not called get number one. We only need to assert one of them. Exactly 0 times. So I'm just going to quickly run that. Yep, perfect. All right, so next thing we need to test is that. So we need to then go, okay, arrange. We're nearly done. All right, so next thing we need to test is that. So what we need to do here is we need to go arrange. So we need to get, we need to mock. Now we don't need to mock now we don't actually need to mock any sort of errors because that's been done within the function itself. The only thing we need to mock is the actual output. So that's fine. So we can then go number 2. We can also mock we also need to mock right error. We're not interested in right error. So let's get our result. And we should have do math. So we just basically say do math. And then we're going to say number 1 is 0. Operator is divide. And number 2 is 0. Like so. And we're basically what's going to happen is that it'll replace them with 4 and 2, and we can assert that it should return 2. So result should be 2. We also need to assert it should have called get number 1. Assert mock called. Command name. Get number 1 exactly 1 time. I'm just going to call it, and then we should have called number 2. And then it also should have called right error exactly 1 time. So let's go ahead and test that. Okay, so we got a whole bunch of errors here. Should have returned 2, but got NaN. Okay, so something's not right here. So we did mock our get number 1, return 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually debug our code and work out what's going on here. So let's go and step in. Okay, if number 1 is equal to 0, which it is, number 2 is equal to 0, yep, and the operator contains that. It didn't. Okay, what's our operator? Oops, okay, so there's a problem with my code. The reason why is because I don't want contains, I want in. I've got them the wrong way around. So let's go ahead and rerun our code. Let's go ahead and disable that breakpoint. Cool, there we go. And that's basically a really, really good output. So we've got our output there, good stuff. What we can do now is we can now write valid input with modules. TULUS 5. Expect the output to be 1. Should be 1. Let's go ahead and rerun all that. Yep, cool. Should return to. I just need to fix that. So essentially, we've done that. Now we can go ahead and fail our test. So let's go ahead and let's just change that to 2 because it'll not be 1. There we go. That's failed. Cool. So essentially, we know our tests are good. So we've tested this specific aspect of the code now. So, and that's pretty much it. We don't need to test anything else. So we can obviously, that is pretty much it. So that pretty much concludes our demos and our lesson for PowerShell testing. So what I'm going to do, we're going to have a quick 5-minute break. I am going to then move on to logging and PS cones. So what I'm going to do is I will stop the stream, but because I need to actually change the names. Because I will need to change the names, and I also need to do it for YouTube because YouTube needs to split I need to split the streams. So what we will do is, yeah, we'll do that. So if you've got any questions, did I just do that whole thing oh man, please tell me I didn't do that whole thing and focus me on the wrong scene. Please tell me I didn't do that. If chat, did I just do that with me in the screen and actually you guys couldn't actually see what I was writing? Because that is not going to be good. I might have to quickly check. Oh, thank God. Thank God. I think I must have switched the scene and then totally forgot. All right. Okay, cool. Just quickly. So what we're going to basically do is, yeah, we'll finish it up for now. I'm not finished for today. I'll be streaming again in a couple of minutes, and we're going to smash out logging, and we're going to smash out PS cones, and then we're going to conclude this course. So what I'm going to do is I will stop the stream now. If you guys got any questions, just hold on to them, and we'll pick it up, and we'll pick it up in 10 minutes. So I'll be back in 10 minutes, and then we'll go from there. So I'll see you guys then.